Life in Santiago for me, it was just so much fun, you know. We grew up out in the backyards of where we live. I remember mommy going out early in the morning saying, you know, I'm going to go get the fruits and the vegetables from the little kind of a kiosk kind of a thing in the corner. He will come there with all the fresh stuff for to the women housewives to buy. We will go in the train for about 2 hours traveling. And the moment we arrived there at the station, it was such a joy of moment seeing my grandfather waiting for us, you know, ready to pick up the luggage and embrace us and take us to the house. His house was very close to the beach. We just walked down there. He was a very generous person, a beautiful person. I remember him as being so lovable and a very serious man, a very hard worker. Well, first it was my father. His dream was always to come to the United States. He came first of all in 1961, I would say, by himself to find a place, to find a good job. You know, it was really an adventure. He worked with the military, teaching Spanish. He was able to earn good funds, and one day he sent a letter to mom and said, "It's time for all of you to come." It was my mother, my sister, my son, 9 months old, and myself, my son Sergio, your father. We departed in a ship, in an Italian ship from Valparaiso. And the whole family was out there, you know, saying goodbye to us. We arrived in Panama. It was kind of an odyssey. Finally, we had to make the other arrangements to fly from Panama in our plane to Miami, this city where you guys live now, Florida. I never knew, you know, that we will end up here. My son will be working at Miami Herald here. You know, that's a coincidence in life. And we ended up in Washington in a trail bus, in one of those Greyhounds in those days. First of all, is to see the tremendous supermarkets compare to what I said at the beginning of the story. You go to the corner, you buy the fresh food. But I remember it was very difficult for my mom. For my mom. Here, she couldn't communicate. Even cooking, she was a great cook. And she would say, I don't know where to find my spices. I don't know what to name them, how to find them by the name. So, Mom, why don't you make this recipe? I can't, I don't know anything. That happened for the 5 first years in a new country are the most hardest. I am thankful for all of this because I created my life. I had a beautiful daughter, Patricia, and my son Sergio, and they both became professionals. Wonderful grandchildren. Today I have 5 grandchildren. A blessing to be here in this country.
But I've always felt I've lived in two worlds, one Chileno and one American. The first major visit we made, in fact, the big visit we made was back in 1972. I was 10 years old, and I remember this vivid scene on the streets of Santiago. At the time, there were a lot of shortages of routine goods. So to get them, you had to stand in lines for a long time. And I still remember the conversation I heard. And to me, it captured what was happening at the time in Chile. There were people in line that were arguing that it was the Americans, the gringos. Then on the other side of the argument was folks in Chile were saying, no, it's not the United States. This is Allende's undoing. But I remember in the late 90s when I first got a chance to go on the internet and find stuff, I would always punch in my other last name. My father's last name is Bustos, but my mother's last name is Bartusevic. And as you can tell, Bartusevic is not necessarily Latin. It's actually a name that comes from the former Yugoslavia, what is today modern day Croatia. Part of me is Croatian. And then one day, up popped uh, a link to a graduate student's paper, and he described 15 families who were living in this one community, one church. And among the 15 names, if you can believe this, was Bartusevic. And he said, you know, that war-torn part of the world prompted huge migration between famine, between war, poverty. A lot of people up and left. And he might have been, said, a young teenage kid, probably not married, jumped on a ship that was off to the New World and headed off to, and ended up in Chile. But I think there's always just simply a profound curiosity of everyone to want to know who they are and where they came from. I was no different.